Hello YouTube, welcome to today's video. In today's video I'll be talking a little bit about how to escape gold and what are some common mistakes that I see in gold elo, both through my previous experience back in the day when I was gold many years ago, and also when I've been coaching people around gold elo and seen what mistakes they typically do and how they basically fix them. So this is a follow-up video from the video I did back in season 10 on how to escape gold. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go through some of the same issues back then, and then after that we're gonna take a look at the guy who was previously gold and the guy who is currently gold, and gonna give specific examples on why are they gold and why they're not higher elo. So the first thing is that they don't understand matchups that well. So gold players tend to just play very much the same way, no matter if they're in a good or bad or even matchup. And that's pretty bad, because when you're playing in a good matchup, then you should play aggressive, and you should play, basically, if you're a laner, then you should try and trade really hard, or you should try and zone off your opponent. And if you're playing in jungle, you should look to invade a lot, instead of just playing to power farm or whatever your normal playstyle is. And when you're in an even matchup, then it comes down to different situations. And when you're in a bad matchup, then obviously you want to play very passively, and you want to wait to fight around your power spikes when it comes to either levels or items, rather than just fighting every single situation whenever you face your opponent. So, and it's also goes with tip number 2 that says can adapt according to the matchup and team comp. So you always need to adapt. You always need to adapt your build. You always need to adapt your playstyle. And when it comes to the matchup, then as I mentioned, you need to sometimes be able to play aggressive, sometimes play passively, and not just play the same way every single time. But it also comes down to your team comp. If you have someone else who's really fed, then you should just let them carry the game, and you kind of sit back and fall back, instead of trying to take as many resources, try and take every kill time, take every wave, take every buff, because there's no point in you taking everything if you already have one person who's already really strong that you can just play around. So that kind of goes with tip number 1. And then the next thing is that they don't respect their opponents from behind. And this kind of also goes along with tip number 1 and 2. This is just a little bit later into the game, where you're already behind, or enemy just simply is ahead due to getting kills, or something's just not working for you in that game. Your ganks are failing, and your laning phase kind of sucked, you got solo killed, whatnot. When you're behind, you want to respect your opponent. You cannot take every single fight when you're behind compared to when you're even or when you're ahead. You need to take the fights that you can actually win. And the type of fights that you can win are when the enemy team is overstaying. So either if they're staying with very little HP, if they just use their ultimate, if they just use their flash, if they're staying with a lot of gold, if they're overstaying in terms of the map, if they're pushed up really far. Those are the type of fights that you can take. You can't just take every single fight and just walk into the enemy and expect that you're going to win when you're behind, because you're simply not going to. If you're down on levels, you're down on gold, you're down on items, and you simply cannot just take every fight that you want. You need to kind of choose which fights you want to take and which one you pretty much just want to leave. Then the next thing is pay attention to the game pace. And some games are very fast paced. Some of them are like average speed, and some of them are very slow paced. And this all depends on what type of team comp do you have. If you have a scaling team comp, you want to play the game very slowly. You don't mind giving up a few dragons. You don't mind giving up a few objectives. You don't mind losing like one wave or a few jungle camps, because you know that the longer the game goes, the bigger the chance of you winning happens, basically, right? And then in the average paced games, then you need to figure out, should I slow the game down a little bit because we scale, or should I speed up the game a little bit because the enemy team outscales, so we have an early game team comp, or is it kind of even? We can just keep going at the same pace. And then when it comes to fast-paced games, this is obviously when you're playing a champion that is really strong in the early game, or if the enemy team simply outscales you, then you want to end the game as fast as possible. So this both comes down to what champion are you playing, but also how is the team comp overall looking compared to the enemy team. So And this again, people just seem to autopilot a lot in gold and pretty much just do the same thing every single game. Like, no matter what matchup they're in, they'll play the same. No matter what situation they're in, they'll play the same. No matter if they're ahead or behind, they play the same. And no matter how their team comp looks like, they'll just pretty much play more or less the same throughout multiple games for a very, very long time. And they don't actively think about what should I do in order to win the game. They pretty much just do what they always do and what they've previously done, even though that's most of the time not the best way to approach the game. And then the last general tip that I have for gold elo is that they're not being proactive enough, they're only reacting. So basically what proactive means is that you are the one looking for a play, and reactive means that you're waiting for a play to happen so that you can react to it with a different type of play. Either to counter it in terms of I'm gonna go to the same side of the map and counter gank it, or I'm gonna go to the opposite side of the map and counter jungle or get an objective or whatever. But basically what I see is that people are not really that proactive, especially on champions that should be playing proactively. Again, if you're playing a champion that is strong in the early and mid game, then you should look to do plays, make plays around the map. Don't wait for their opponent to make a play and then you follow up with a play to match it. So those are my general tips for gold. And now we'll basically go into a guy who was previously gold, who is now silver 1, and a guy who is currently gold 4. So if we start with this guy who used to be gold, who is now silver. First of all, the reason why he is not in gold by now is because that he hasn't played for 2 weeks straight. So that's the first thing. He is very inactive type of player. Then the second thing is that his champion pool is very advanced. He decided to play a champion like Qiyana, basically become a one trick, which I don't mind. I think this is pretty good. But the champion that he decided to pick is a very high skill cap champion. And typically when you are lower elo, you don't have the mechanics to pull off the champion, because what you'll see is that the player kind of has some good games with a lot of kills, but he also has a lot of deaths, meaning that he's both taking a lot of gold and he's giving a lot of gold, and he cannot carry on the champion, mostly probably because of mechanics are not there. So instead of picking a champion like Qiyana, which I personally wouldn't recommend, I would decide to pick other champions that are a little bit more easy. Now, I'm not saying that you should just only pick easy champions, but picking easy champions is definitely gonna help you in a positive way in order to climb, compared to picking a mechanically intense champion. So what I would recommend are, I think Kayn is a decent champion, Hecarim is a decent champion, Sensei, Trundle, I mean even the Kha'Zix is definitely a lot easier than the Qiyana. And basically when you choose your champion pool, you need to figure out what type of champion do I enjoy. Because when people ask me what champion should I play to reach gold, and if I say I think that the best champion right now to reach gold would be to pick Warwick or to pick Sejuani. If you don't enjoy those type of champions, you're not going to play them. That's why I never recommend champions for people. But I give a few champions that they can try out, and then they basically get to decide themselves, are you going to stick to that champion or are you not going to stick to it? So the most important thing when you pick your champion pool is, do you enjoy playing the champion? Because what we're looking to do is we're looking to pick 1 to 4 champions. And in order to play 1 to 4 champions in 200 to 300 games that we need per season, more or less, in order to climb at least, we pretty much are expected to play 75 to 100 games on each champion, if not even more. So you definitely need to pick a champion that you enjoy playing. Pick something that you think is fun. And if you don't enjoy all these other champions that is right here, Kayn, Hecarim, Kha'Zix, and Trundle, then pick some other ones. Because if you're picking a champion like Qiyana, and you have a negative win rate with over 131 games, the reason why the win rate is negative is because the champion is very difficult to play. Do you compare that to a different champion that's really, really easy? You don't need that many games in order to become good at the champion. If you're picking a champion that's very difficult like Qiyana to play, you might need to play 200 games just to get like decent at the champion. Playing a champion like Hecarim, you can probably get away with just playing 10 games, and you'll have a pretty good understanding of how do you play Hecarim compared to 200 games of Qiyana. So that's the first thing. The champion pool is very highly mechanical and does not seem to work out. But other champions does seem to work out, like the Kayn, the Hecarim, the Kha'Zix, even the Xin Zhao. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is that, again, player has been very inactive. And then the player also seems to do some weird builds on Qiyana. Like I'm seeing a Dead Man's Plate, and I'm seeing a lot of Death Dance instead of just flat out lethality, where we should have like a lot of Ghost Blade. So again, I don't think this player has done good enough research on how to play Qiyana. Probably hasn't been looking at jungle Qiyana players, but in the first place I wouldn't recommend playing Qiyana. But if the player insists that I really enjoy playing Qiyana, then do better research on Qiyana, because this build is just not the best build that you can do. So yeah. Then for the next account right here, this guy is currently gold. And the reason why this guy hasn't escaped gold yet is, first of all, the amount of games that he has is very, very low. As of right now, fairly low. Again, another inactive player. You need to play more games. Maybe not as of right now, but you need to play more consistently at least, because if you take 2 weeks off, you're not the same player after a 2-week break. Maybe win on a different account, I don't know. But again, inactivity is not that good. You can take a few days break, that's fine, but taking multiple weeks off, not good. Now, the second thing is that, again, the champion pool, here I agree a little bit more, because I think that Hecarim is pretty good, Fiddlestick is pretty good. Champion like Jarvan and Diana also think are pretty good, maybe also the Rek'Sai, so I like this champion pool a lot more. But here comes the same thing. There are a lot of things when it comes to the build that is simply incorrect. I don't think that this is the best setup for Graves. I don't think Phase Rush combined with Divine Sunder is the best. I think Conquer is a lot better. First Strike with Arctis is situational. I don't think it's bad, but you need to know when to use it. This looks pretty good, so I think this is good. Same thing for here. I don't think this is what you're supposed to do. Then here he goes Conquer, so here he goes the correct rune setup. So the Jarvan, I like a lot. I think this is really, really good, the way that he's playing Jarvan. And here a game of Electrocute Rek'Sai. We don't want to play with that. A game of Lethal Temple Sensei, which is fine to do, but then you shouldn't do Gore Drinker. And then we have some games of Tribreaker Graves is fine. Then we have some Shyvana. Then we're gonna have some Hecarim. So there are some games that look good and the rune setups are good and the players seem to have an understanding of what he's doing. And then there are other games where the player does not understand when to do each of the runes, each of the builds. And again, this comes to adapting. The player probably is changing some of these runes or some of these builds to try and adapt, but he's doing them incorrectly. He's doing them at the wrong times. And that can just set you back because, first of all, runes is like the most important thing because it can change the entire early game for you. And then when it comes to build is also really, really important because if you're spending a lot of gold, if you're spending good amount of gold, then what will happen is that 100 to maybe 110% of the gold that you spend will be gold efficient, right? But if you then start buying bad items, then let's say you buy items that's worth 3,000 gold, and out of those 3,000 gold, instead of it being like 3k that actually is good on your champion, it might only be 2k. So 66% of the gold that you've spent is good, but then the last third part of the gold that you spend on that item is not good compared to buying a different item that would have been better. And this again comes down to adapting. Then another thing I see is inconsistency when it comes to control words. Again, buys 4 controllers here, this is pretty good, but then 0 controllers in a 34-minute game is really, really bad. The player also doesn't swap to Red Trinket, which is also pretty bad for jungle because we want to have Red Trinket, but then some games he does it. It's not that he cannot go Red Trinket because he does it, it's not that he cannot do control words because he can buy them, and he can probably also use them, but he doesn't do it consistently, he doesn't do it all the time. The player is more or less being lazy, and then also taking very big breaks from the game. So, those are basically my tips for gold elo. Some of these tips might apply to you, some of these tips might not apply to you. I tried going first very broad with these type of tips right here. These are some more typical ones I see, but obviously every gold player is not the same. But throughout the games that I've seen and the people that I've coached within gold elo, these seems to be the most like occurring ones. And then I tried to go a little bit more into specific through the op.gg. So yeah, if your op.gg, if your league profile looks like this, if you're doing some of these mistakes, then in order to become better, do some better research. Again, try and take a look at people who are a little bit higher elo. Take a look at some plat diamond games for champions that you play. Or you can simply go ahead and order a coaching session from me, and then I can help you. If you have never tried a coaching session before, I heavily recommend this coaching pack right here. Costs $10, and you get help with your entire early game. No matter if you're lane or if you're jungler, the first 15 minutes of the game we will take a look at. If you're struggling a little bit more with late and mid game macro, then option 2 right here for 25, we go through an entire game. Also op.gg review, so we get to take a look at your items and builds and whatnot. And we also have live game options, double sessions, and long-term students, and all of this includes a refund. So if you are not sure, you can always buy the session, get the session, and then if you're not happy with the session that you got, just email me and then I'll give you your money back. So no issues there. So try that out. And yeah, otherwise just be aware of the fact that these are basically some of the issues that are holding yourself back and basically making sure that you're not climbing higher. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. If you have any questions or any feedback, leave in the comment section down below. And always, if you guys want to see more and see next up video being how to escape plat elo, then remember to subscribe. And then I hope to see you guys in my next YouTube video or on my next live stream on Twitch. So thank you for watching and see you guys.